we have to start talking about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. We need to start covering and talking about the concept of energy transformations. Now buckle up, kids, because this is going to be a very long ride. It's not hard, it's just that there is a lot to cover. So, let's start with photosynthetic autotrophs. They synthesize their own organic carbon compounds from inorganic materials using light as the energy source to do so. Then we have chemosynthetic autotrophs, which synthesize their own organic carbon compounds from inorganic material using energy derived from chemical processes. So photosynthetic ones use light, derive energy from light. Chemosynthetic derive energy through chemical processes, and heterotrophs are reliant on intake and digestion of organic molecules from an external source. Now, let's cover a bit what ATP is before we continue. ATP is essentially adenosine triphosphate. Now, adenosine triphosphate can actually be broken down into adenosine diphosphate plus the phosphate molecule, and it's the last phosphate that can be broken. The bond of the last phosphate molecule with the rest can be broken or reattached again. And energy can be obviously formed when that happens, right? You can release energy, or you can store energy there, and that's a really important concept because people don't realize it can go both ways, right? So when the bond is broken, the energy is released, and ADP plus P is the result of that. So this would be the reactant, and this would be the product. So energy from catabolism, or an exergonic energy releasing process, will result in the formation of ADP. Energy for cellular work, such as anergonic energy consuming processes, will use that energy. Oh, okay, that's funny. Get it? Are you hungry? I could use a light snack. Light, because plants need light to grow and survive. Never mind. Okay, so let's talk about photosynthesis a bit. Now, I know you guys are bio 1, 2, but I'll explain it as well as I can. In 3-4, you need to know a bit more about these processes when we're talking about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. In 3-4, you basically also need to know the Cellular and Krebs cycle, but at the moment that's not that necessary or at all actually. So let's explain the basic concepts underpinning photosynthesis. So the process in which light energy is transformed into chemical energy is essentially the definition of photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis, you synthesize energy by utilizing light energy. So you convert light energy into chemical energy. But how do plants do this? Because this is a process that primarily occurs in plants. How do plants do this? Because it's phenomenal. They do this through an organelle which is called a chloroplast. Now, chloroplasts are located primarily in plant cells, and they have essentially a pigment which is referred to as chlorophyll. Now, chlorophyll is a pigment that can capture light and convert that energy into chemical energy. That pigment is located in the thylakoid membrane, making up the chloroplast. And because it is located in the thylakoid membranes, the membranes, when they're stuck together, they can form something that we call grana, right? And a part of the process occurs in the thylakoid membrane, and part of it doesn't. Depends whether we're talking about the light-dependent or the light-independent stage. In the thylakoid membrane is where the light-dependent stage occurs. In the stroma, which is essentially not part of the thylakoid membrane, is where the light-independent stage of photosynthesis occurs. So, the chloroplast is the organelle that is the site of photosynthesis. It is essentially made up of an outer membrane and an inner membrane, where the grana stacks of thylakoid sites of the light-dependent are the site of the light-dependent stage, and the stroma is the fluid matrix, where it's the site of the light-independent stage. Now, obviously, there are other stuff, for example, that you might need to know, such as the fact that granum is a stack of thylakoids, and the lumen, but honestly, there's time for that. Focus on the main takeaway points. Because honestly, what you're learning now, when I studied part of it at uni, it can go on forever. But let's keep going. Thylakoids within their membranes contain photosynthetic pigments known as chlorophyll. These are the photosynthetic pigments which absorb the light energy used in photosynthesis. There are various types of chlorophyll, such as chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. And these different types of chlorophyll absorb different wavelengths of light. Some are good at absorbing green, some are good at absorbing red, and so on. Now, rubisco is a key enzyme involved in the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle is something that is the process through which photosynthesis occurs. Its role is to fixate a carbon molecule from carbon dioxide into an organic molecule that the plant uses for energy storage, which eventually becomes glucose. So rubisco is the enzyme that fixes carbon into the glucose form. During the Calvin cycle, rubisco fixates carbon to become the organic molecule G3P, a 3-carbon molecule, where half of a glucose molecule, 2 G3P molecules, make 1 glucose. During this fixation process, carbon dioxide reacts with rub-P, 5-carbon molecule, to make a 6-carbon molecule that splits into 2 G3Ps. Now, this sounds like a lot of technical terms if you were to go through this. Personally, I would say, again, this happens during the light-independent reaction stage. Don't spend too much time on it. Now, you do need to know it, don't get me wrong at all. Don't get me wrong at all. You do need to know it, absolutely. But basically, it's saying the process of carbon fixation is facilitated by the enzyme rubisco. It occurs during the light-independent reaction, and it results in glucose being formed. That's all, right? Enzyme rubisco fixes G3P into glucose. It all occurs during the light-independent reaction. That's all. Now, you might see other molecules involved in here, such as NADPH and all of that. Those are still energy carrier molecules, because ATP is not the only energy carrying molecule. There are other energy carrying molecules. And after the Calvin cycle is finished, sugar will be the output, and oxygen, obviously. Now, what is really important for VCE, and this is why the diagram is there, is for you guys to know the inputs and the outputs of photosynthesis. The inputs of photosynthesis are water, carbon dioxide, and light. The outputs are oxygen and sugar. But you also have to focus on the energy carrying molecules. Now, these ones kind of rotate during the Calvin cycle, where ATP can be converted into ATP plus phosphate, and NADPH can be converted into NADP. So this is a summary of the photosynthesis, where essentially 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 water molecules through light will form sugar and 6 oxygen molecules. Now, most plants will undergo photosynthesis via the pathway we've just looked at, and these are C3 plants. Under typical conditions, photosynthesis works well. However, in C3 plants, it can sometimes be inefficient. This is due to a process called photorespiration, which involves the enzyme rubisco. Rubisco's role in the light-independent stage is to fixate carbon. However, during photorespiration, it instead fixates oxygen. This wastes energy and uses up carbon molecules, making photosynthesis inefficient. Photorespiration occurs when carbon dioxide levels are low. C4 plants are usually found in hotter areas. Therefore, to minimize water loss, C4 plants often have their stomata closed. Having closed stomata lowers the amount of carbon dioxide entering the plant, leading to photorespiration. To combat this, C4 plants separate the light-dependent and independent stages into different cells. In mesophyll cell, carbon dioxide is fixed into a molecule called malate. Malate is then transported into a bundle sheath cell, where it releases carbon dioxide that is fixated by rubisco. This means that even when it's hot, C4 plants can close their stomata and still have a supply of carbon dioxide for rubisco, preventing photorespiration from occurring. Now let's talk about chem plants. Chem plants function in a similar way to C4 plants and are adapted mainly to dry environments. Instead of separating locations, chem plants separate the light-dependent plus independent reactions over time. Stomata are open at night when it is cooler and more humid, and this is when CO2 enters the plant. It is then converted into malate, which is stored in the plant until the daytime. During the day, malate releases carbon dioxide, which rubisco fixates during the Calvin cycle. Can plants can also close their stomata during the day and still have a supply of carbon dioxide for rubisco, preventing photorespiration from occurring. So kind of that's the gist when it comes to photosynthesis. Some of you might say, wow, that was a lot of information, and it actually is. But as long as you know the inputs and the outputs and the general gist of photosynthesis, like where it occurs and why it occurs, you should be fine. So no need to overstress about some things. Now let's cover a bit of cellular respiration content. Now during school, some of the main details that you learn is that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Well, today we're going to break your heart a little bit because, I mean, you're not wrong, but there's quite a lot that goes into it. First of all, cellular respiration is the process in which glucose is broken down to form ATP. There are two types of cellular respiration. One is aerobic respiration and the other one is anaerobic respiration. One uses oxygen and the other one does not use oxygen. Now, cellular respiration occurs in the mitochondria, where essentially glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water, which is around 36 to 38 ATP. Now, we call this an exothermic reaction. Photosynthesis was an endothermic reaction, but we call this an exothermic reaction because energy is released into the environment. Now, keep in mind that glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm, whereas Krebs cycle occurs in the mitochondrial matrix. We're going to cover what all those terms mean, so no need to stress. And the electron transport chain occurs in the chrysaea. So let's start with anaerobic respiration. Well, it occurs in the cytoplasm, where glucose is broken down into lactic acid and 2 ATP molecules. Afterwards, glucose will be for animals, the very first stage, during anaerobic respiration, glucose will be broken down into lactic acid and 2 ATP molecules. For animals, for plants and yeast, it will be broken down into carbon dioxide and ethanol, and it will produce 2 ATP. So again, when it comes to anaerobic respiration and the breakdown of glucose, in animals or mammals, it will be broken down into lactic acid and 2 ATP, whereas for plants, it will be broken down into carbon dioxide, ethanol, and 2 ATP. You can think about the fermentation of yeast, right? Now, for aerobic respiration to occur, it requires oxygen to be present. It occurs in the mitochondria, and it requires a combination of water and carbon dioxide, and it results in more ATP being formed. Sorry. Water and carbon dioxide are the actual outputs. For anaerobic respiration, no oxygen is required as we showed it before. Glycolysis can occur in the cytoplasm, or the cytosol, because the cytoplasm means the cytosol plus the organelles. And with anaerobic respiration, the products are lactic acid for animals, ethanol and carbon dioxide for plants. And it results in significantly less ATP. So let's go through some Vega style questions to see if you guys understood what I've said so far. So the chloroplast is the organelle responsible for photosynthesis in eukaryotic cells. In chloroplasts, the light-independent reactions require water as the initial reactant. That's A. B. The light-independent reactions occur in the inner membrane area. C. The final product of the reaction is glucose. D. The light reactions occur in the grana. The answer is D. The light reactions occur in the grana. How about question 10? Let's look at this for a bit. How about question 10? Fermentation in yeast. A. Produces ethanol. B. Requires lactic acid. C. Involves the Krebs cycle. D. Requires the presence of oxygen. Which one do you think is the correct answer? Well, of course, A, the fact that it produces ethanol, is the correct answer. Now, I'm gonna cover some other stuff which I didn't mention. So, let's do that. Now what I will try and do is I will try and put side to side photosynthesis and cellular respiration so you guys can see the connection between the two. So, during photosynthesis, essentially we have 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 H2O, which will give us C6H12O6, right? And during this time, the cell actually uses ATP. And ADP plus P will also be a byproduct. Therefore, we call this an endothermic reaction, a reaction which absorbs thermal energy in order for it to be processed. Then there is the exothermic reaction or aerobic respiration, where C6H12O6 plus 6O2 will lead to the formation of 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus 36 ADP. Now for this ADP to be formed, ADP needed to be on the reactant side, right? It is crucial to remember that aerobic cellular respiration is essentially an exothermic reaction. It is the oxidation of glucose into carbon dioxide and water. Whereas photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction. Photosynthesis uses up ATP, whereas cellular respiration produces ATP.